We are now live. Welcome
Hello,
back,
Steve.
Podfeet, or I should say, welcome back, SP Sheridan.
Welcome back to you, Steve. It's nice of you to join us.
It's good to be back. It was quite an experience in DC, but I'm glad to be home.
Well, we had fun without you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, you're the only reason anything got messed up in the live show.
I was happy to help out.
I still can't believe you did that. Exactly what happened? Did you go into the chat room? You went into voice when you weren't supposed to, right?
Yeah, well, let's see. Right. I went into voice because I wanted to chat. You can't chat in the chat room. At least I couldn't easily without going into the live show. And so I entered live show listen, but forgot that I didn't have a mic and couldn't mute. Well, I guess I could have. So I ended up eventually doing that. But in the meantime, you were getting the sound through my MacBook speakers.
That's nice. Seamus is saying you should have had a meetup, but you did not have any spare time.
I had no time at all. But yeah, that would have been neat. But it was wall to wall, back to back. I did get a little bit of time to walk around and see some buildings, but not enough time to go visit some friends.
And it was unpredictable when you would have time.
Yeah, my schedule was not mine.
Well, Kevin and Seamus, you guys can meet up.
Yeah.
Nothing to keep you guys from getting together. All right. I think I should start.
Okay.
How do you feel about that, dear?
Let's get this ball rolling.
All right. Here we go. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, May 5th, 2024, and this is show number 991. Well, this Tuesday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, Apple has an announcement widely believed to be for a new set of iPads. I have my hopes set on an OLED 12.9-inch iPad Pro, so my little eyes and ears will be glued to this announcement. If you'd like to join the friendliest bunch of folks in the live chat room during the announcement, I hope you'll join us by going to podfeet.com/chat during the announcement. As usual, Steve and I will not be in the voice channel since the real fun is in the announcement, not hearing us yap. We hope to see you there. You're on vacation. You're on vacation right now? Thank you for the save. All right. Oh, that's right. On Monday? Oh, no.
But the chat or the event's Tuesday, right?
Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday. Yes. All right. Next 2 weeks. You deserve a break. All right, here we go. This week I had a blast on Clockwise number 552, hosted by Micah Sargent and Dan Morin, with Okay, that says Go Guest. I'm not going to be able to say that correctly if it doesn't say Co-Guest. All right, back here. This week, I had a blast on Clockwise 552, hosted by Micah Sargent and Dan Morin. On the show was co-guest Jeff Carlson, who I'd never met before. He's a tech author and a podcaster. And in this 30-minute action-packed show, we talked about what features in iOS we'd like to see improved with generative AI. You know, that's what Apple's going to be talking about supposedly at WWDC. So it's kind of fun to use our imaginations and think about what would we like to see iOS be able to do. My topic was about the process each of us follow to cure home networking issues and how long is it before we actually call for help. Our answers were curiously similar, which was basically the last resort is to call for help. Then we talked about the probable upcoming iPad announcement and what it would take for each of us to buy a new one. It was kind of funny. Jeff Carlson actually said he felt guilty because he's not going to buy one. And I suggested that, the stock really does need his help. Finally, we bemoaned the recent problems Apple had caused so many people to be locked out of their Apple IDs, and we pondered whether having so many eggs in that one basket is really a good idea. I have to say, I don't want to say I took pleasure in other people being locked out of their Apple IDs, but you remember a week and a half ago, I said, hey, this seems like it's on Apple server sides when it happened to me, and then it happened to everybody else, so I think it's probably still connected. Anyway, as always, you can find Clockwise in your podcatcher of choice, and there's a direct link to episode number 552 in the show notes at relay.fm. Here's a bird. There's some dogs. Here's a bird. Oh, those are cute puppies.
I think you can direct message people in Discord if you want to exchange email addresses, Kevin. As I recall, there's a way to do that, I think. Isn't there? Maybe you have to be friends or something in Discord.
Yeah, I think you have to make, you do have to request to be friends. Don't say yes, Seamus. All right. I feel like there was one other typo, but it's going to move along. Next up.
Ian. Ian's in the house. Oh, did you do a roll call?
I didn't do a roll call. Did anybody tell me to?
I don't think so.
Hey, if you guys don't tell me to do roll call, how am I supposed to be? I can't keep track of everything. I think you just did. Yeah, not Kevin's job. All right. It is Seamus and Kevin and Ian and Jill and Ed and John and Sandy and Steve. You know, when Lindsay was hosting here, producing the show, she got a bigger audience, Steve.
Well, yeah, I can't compete with that.
She's cuter than all of us, right?
Yeah.
And Waylon and Sheriff. Well, if we start counting pets. All right. Let's go get a new. All right, here we go. Nope. If you've been listening to me for any length of time, you know I'm a huge proponent of doing a nuke and pave of my Mac, also known as a clean install, pretty much around once a year. You can just search podfeed.com for nuke and pave to read all of the articles I've written on this subject over the years. I definitely believe in doing a nuke and pave when I get a new computer. Now, when I say nuke and pave or clean install, I mean installing every single app one by one and configuring every little bit of it by hand. The only thing I bring over from a backup is my data, no settings at all. I'm a bit unusual in how much I tailor my Mac, so this is a very lengthy process. I'm not going to go into all the details because I've described how to do it as recently as last October. The downside of this process is that it takes me about 5 days on and off to get everything working properly. But the upside is that everything is predictable. Because I've documented my apps and settings before I start the process, I know how much work I have to do. I break it down into the mission-critical apps and settings, important apps and settings, and then the ones that I use, but they're not that critical, and maybe they can wait for a bit. It's a daunting task, to be sure, but I find the rigor of the process pleasing. But I strayed from my tried and true. It's a daunting task to. But this week, I strayed from my tried and true process. After fighting with Apple for 12.7 months about the massive battery drain on my M1 Max MacBook Pro, I broke down and bought a new M3 Max MacBook Pro. I realized that if I used Migration Assistant to move all of my apps and settings and had them exactly the way they were on the older Mac, it would give me a unique opportunity to prove to Apple once and for all that it was not my apps and settings causing the problems. This was my first time using Migration Assistant. Can you pronounce that word? This was pretty much my first time using Migration Assistant in ages. Now, I gotta tell you, I've been shocked to find that Migration Assistant is anything but rigorous and predictable. Everyone always talks about Migration Assistant as though, why am I stuttering so much? This was pretty much, these are not hard sentences. This was pretty much my first time using Migration Assistant in ages. I have to say, I've been shocked to find that Migration Assistant is anything but rigorous and predictable. Everyone always talks about Migration Assistant as though, it just works. That sure has not been my experience. Let's walk through just a little bit of the fun I've had. We'll start with apps from the Mac App Store. Those, if anything, should have come across seamlessly, but several did not. I use Mars Edit to write all of my blog posts, so it's high on the mission-critical list. When I launched Mars Edit for the first time after the migration, it asked for my license key. Well, that didn't make any sense because I bought it from the Mac App Store. I tried to just downloaded again from the Mac App Store, but I got a different error. It simply said, unable to download app. So that was swell. I contacted Daniel Jalkut, developer of Mars Edit, and he explained that he stores all of the settings in separate files, and they don't get deleted when you delete the app. Luckily, Hazel wasn't working yet, so its app sweep of the trash didn't delete those files when I deleted Mars Edit. Now, I don't know if something healed in the Mac App Store, but after Daniel's email, I was able to download fresh from the Mac App Store. Now, Mars Edit is one of the most well-behaved apps I use, and even Mars Edit from the Mac App Store doesn't gracefully transfer with Migration Assistant. I mean, this means I'm doomed if something as good as Mars Edit doesn't work. Now, Telegram is my messaging app of choice, and while it worked, I had no avatars for any of my contacts. One of the joys of Telegram is that you can create these cute little avatars for groups, too, which means it's easy to see at a glance who you're talking to. Searching a long list of names was a terrible experience. I uninstalled and reinstalled Telegram from the Mac App Store several times, and I finally just gave up. After about 4 days, my avatars came back. I have no idea what caused the problems, but I'm sure glad that the picture of a glass of wine is there for my Wine Wednesday chat group in Telegram again. Let's see, who's up next? Mac Tracker. This is an awesome app that lets you learn everything about every Mac, iPhone, iPad, or accessory Apple has ever made. And you know what? It decided it didn't want to function after Migration Assistant either. It popped up a dire warning with a yellow triangle with an exclamation point inside of it, and it says, MacTracker.app is damaged and can't be opened. You should move it to the trash. Well, I sure didn't want to throw away Mac Tracker, but I had no choice. So I selected Move to Trash. The next pop-up was even worse. Now, instead of a warning, I had a scary red stop sign with an exclamation point and a new warning that said, MacTracker.app could not be moved to the trash. So, come on, guys. This is Apple's Mac App Store, Apple's downloader, presumably Apple's warnings, and of course, Apple's Migration Assistant. I dragged Mac Tracker into the trash, and the operating system asked me to authenticate, and it worked. Only then could I download again from the Mac App Store, and it worked as designed. Oh, the sausage samurai, I like it. Nice. When I tried to launch the delightful window manager, Moom, from the Mac App Store, I got the same dire warning that it was damaged and the red stop sign telling me I can't throw it in the trash. I didn't even try to fight it. I dragged it into the trash manually, authenticated, re-downloaded, and Moom was back working again. But why, Apple? Why do I have to do this? I use an app called Auto Mounter to mount my Synology volumes automatically. This lets Hazel clean up my audio files for the podcast by moving them to the Synology without my intervention. But Auto Mounter comes from the Mac App Store, so of course, things did not go well. It was slightly different from Mac Tracker and Moom's warnings. The pop-up said it was damaged and couldn't be opened, but it didn't bother to offer to send it into the trash for me. On a lark, I didn't delete Auto Mounter. Instead, I went to the Mac App Store, searched for Auto Mounter, and I simply clicked the Open button, and that worked. No uninstall, no authentication, or reinstall required. I have no idea why this worked. And remember, I tried this method with Mars Edit, and that didn't work. So I can't even find a pattern here to the way these things are breaking. I don't understand why all of these apps were damaged, but it's obvious to me the blame is entirely on Apple because this many developers didn't screw this up. So that's it for the Mac App Store fails that I've experienced so far, but the Mac App Store apps aren't the only ones giving me fits. Let's move on to whine about what apps are the apps that aren't from the Mac App Store. Probably the worst of my apps to have trouble making the great migration of 2024 was Backblaze. This is a terrific offsite backup service. It's not on my mission critical list because I have local backups, and most of my data also lives in a syncing solution, iCloud Drive, Dropbox, or Google Drive. I obviously want it to work, but I tend to wait a little bit to start backups when switching machines until I'm sure everything else is migrated properly. Before the migration, I had my M1 MacBook Pro and my M2 MacBook Air backed up to Backblaze. I launched Backblaze on the new M3 MacBook Pro with the intention of inheriting the license and backup from the M1 MacBook Pro. But when I brought up Backblaze, it was a hot mess. And it's hard to even describe what a hot mess it was, but I'm going to try. The opening window had the Backblaze logo in the center, but every word on the screen was error dialogues. For example, the center said, error underscore main dialog underscore top banner underscore initial backup paused. There were 3 buttons labeled error main dialog button, followed by something I couldn't read because it was falling off the button. There were unformatted error messages on the right. There were links to errors. Like I said, it was a hot mess. Obviously, a reinstall of Backblaze was required. Now, I probably should have followed their uninstall instructions on the Backblaze website, but I forgot that they were there. In any case, they're quite arduous. They have an uninstaller, but they say to run it and to do this deep dive into all kinds of library preferences files and delete things. I really think their uninstaller does the work, but they don't tell you that you don't have to do both. In any case, I took the easy path and I reinstalled, and Backblaze worked just dandy. Now, I sent a copy of the awful screen I saw after the migration to the Backblaze folks, just kind of as an FYI to explain that their software didn't graciously migrate. I explained that I'd gotten past it by reinstalling, so this was just to warn them. At that point, I successfully adopted a backup on the new M3 MacBook Pro. Well, a few days later, I start using the M2 MacBook Air, and a window popped up telling me Backblaze is no longer working on this Mac because the license had been taken by another Mac. That's when I realized that Backblaze never asked me which backup to adopt. It didn't take the one from the M1 MacBook Pro, it took the one from the M2 MacBook Air. Well, the folks at Backblaze worked with me to get this sorted out, but it took about 8 emails back and forth, much discussion before we were able to get Backblaze to ask me which backup to adopt. It also involved deleting several now dead backups through the Backblaze web interface. I never had to do anything like this before when I got a new Mac, and I did a pave from scratch. Now, Dropbox was as big of a mess as Backblaze, and I'm not certain I have it completely sorted yet. The first symptom was pretty normal by now. macOS told me simply the application Dropbox.app can't be opened with an OK button. It's not that it can't be opened with an OK button. Now, Dropbox, it can't be opened, and it had an OK button. Now, Dropbox was almost as big of a mess as Backblaze, and I'm not entirely sure I have it completely sorted yet. The first symptom was pretty normal by now. macOS told me simply that the application Dropbox.app can't be opened, and it had an OK button. Not as alarming, but it still wasn't working. I went to the website and I downloaded and installed a fresh version of Dropbox. Before I can explain what happened, I have to refresh everyone's memory on how cloud storage providers work with modern macOS. Last year around this time, Adam Angst of Tidbits fame was on Chit Chat Across the Pond Light, and he talked to us about Apple's changes to how cloud storage services are implemented in macOS. Apple dropped kernel extensions, I think for security reasons, and they created a new file provider extension. Now that's all the under the hood stuff. From a user perspective, what we saw was the cloud service apps moved from being kind of top-level citizens to showing in the left sidebar together under locations. All of your files for cloud storage services are actually now in your home library cloud storage. Now that's an interesting location since your library is a hidden directory by default. This was one of those resistance is futile situations where you pretty much had to go along with this change. Now, I had long since allowed Dropbox to adopt the file provider extension before I migrated to the new Mac. I checked Dropbox a few days after I made the migration and noticed that none of my Dropbox files had migrated over to the new Mac, and they hadn't downloaded from the Dropbox servers either. That's when I realized that Dropbox was not using the new file provider extension. From the menu bar app, I had to go through the dance again to let Dropbox make that transition. Now, that seems really odd. It was set up that way before. Why would it have not migrated that way? I then had to keep tickling the Dropbox files to get them to download to the new Mac. Nothing came down on its own. I had to keep right-clicking saying, yes, download this whole folder, download this whole folder, download this whole folder. Finally, things seemed to be downloaded. By the way, I know I have it set correctly to download all files locally because that's what I want. So last week, Bart and I recorded Chit Chat Across the Pond. When we record the show, we both do what's called a double ender recording. That means I record my voice locally and his voice from Zoom. He does the same thing on his end. He records his voice locally and my voice on Zoom. When we're done, he moves his recording to a shared Dropbox folder. Then I pull both double enders into my recording software, Hindenburg. I delete my Zoom recording of him and his Zoom recording of me, leaving two good directly recorded voices. This is a way of ensuring that if either of us has a problem recording, we at least have one copy of both of our voices, but if we both succeed, we get 2 really good recordings. After Bart said he'd successfully uploaded his file to Dropbox, I told him, I said, it never came down. You must have done something wrong. Well, we occasionally have hiccups on one end or the other with his transfer process, so I suggested he check again. He sent me screenshots, and all indications on his end were that it should be on Dropbox, ready for me to see, but it still wasn't there. I wondered what could be wrong other than a bandwidth problem on my end. I opened Find Any File, my favorite way to do deep searches on my Mac, and discovered that I now have 2 copies of Dropbox in my home library cloud storage folder. One of them is called Dropbox, and it has the pretty logo, and the other is called Dropbox 42324 7:08 p.m. and has a generic folder icon. Now, this isn't an alias, but I found a couple of those too. It was a complete duplicate of all of my files, 122 gigabytes worth. Now, I was able to finally clean that mess up, but our Bart Allison share folder in Dropbox that I had in my left sidebar was pointing to that wrong Dropbox, which is why I could never see Bart's file. How terrifying is that? I rely on the app Hazel from Noodlesoft to do a lot of work on my Mac. I've already mentioned how it does an app sweep of the trash for me to get all the weird little files off my system, and I use it to move local files to my Synology when they get stale. This is a fantastic application with great support from the developer Paul Kim, but for some reason on this new Mac, having just used Migration Assistant, my rules were all fractured. I'm getting errors when I open the app, errors when I try to save a rule. I've got runaway circular jobs going on, so things get copied from my Mac over to the Synology, and then they get copied back. And Paul and I have been going back and forth. I've been making videos for him now since Hazel rules sync between my Macs. Now it's broken on my other Mac. It's just completely polluted, and it's a hot mess again. And I know that Paul writes good software, and this shouldn't be happening. The only difference in the way this happened was because I used Migration Assistant. Now, would you believe even Apple's developer tools don't work after Migration Assistant? In order to test web apps on iOS during development, like with the work we're doing on XKPassWD, I use the Xcode simulator. This lets you bring up a fake iPhone or iPad on your Mac and see how it looks and acts at different sizes and orientation, how your code looks, I should say. When I tried, no, that was clumsy. Now, would you believe even Apple, start that one again. Now, would you believe that even Apple's developer tools don't work after Migration Assistant? In order to test web apps on iOS during development, like with the work we're doing in XKPassWD, I use the Xcode simulator. That lets you bring up a fake iPhone or iPad on your Mac, and you can see how your web app looks and acts at different sizes and orientations while you're doing the development, not using the real website. When I tried to run it for the first time on the new Mac, after Migration Assistant's help, it gave me a pop-up that told me I need to install additional required components. It wasn't hard to fix, but why on earth did only part of Xcode come across with Migration Assistant? If anything proves that this is all Apple, it's got to be that example. Now, while the problems I've discussed were huge and took a lot of my time and were incredibly unpredictable, I was more tolerant but still surprised that basically none of my security settings transferred over. Every single app that wants to use the camera or the microphone or even record the screen like screenshot apps, all of them had to be reapproved. Every app that wanted full disk access had to be reapproved. Sorry. Every app that wanted... All right. Thanks a lot, Ian. No, actually, that really helps. It's very visual obviously it's visual. It's a sausage. And he's a samurai. That helps keep my attention. All right. Yeah, you might want to start over. All of them had to be reapproved. App that wants to use the camera or the microphone or even record the screen like screenshot apps, all of them had to be reapproved. Every app that wanted full disk access had to be reapproved. Every app that uses accessibility had to be reapproved. Rogue Amoeba has a new way of asking... Also in the security category, Rogue Amoeba has a new way of getting permission to hijack audio, but not all of their apps use this new audio routing kit or ARC method just yet. That means to use their older audio capture engine, you still have to boot into safe mode and lower the security settings. I'm not surprised I had to do that one by hand rather than Migration Assistant doing it for me, but it was still annoying to do. Another weird thing is a lot of apps lost their launch and login status, and that makes no sense to me. I don't see how that's security related, but that kept happening. Finally, I was annoyed at the software I had to move manually because of the way they're licensed. That's not Migration Assistant's fault, but you know what? I'm on a roll airing of the grievances here, so I'm going to whine a little bit. Parallels Toolbox is licensed per machine, but at least it lets me pull a license from another machine. I don't have to log into the old one and let it go. SetApp is licensed per machine too, and it's pretty expensive. So I did have to release the license on the old Mac first. Glad I didn't trade it in before he did that. ScreenFlow has a Mac App Store version, but it's really cost prohibitive. A license of version 10 on the Mac App Store is $170 every time they come out with a new version, whereas an upgrade of my standalone license was only $59. So again, I had to release the license on the old Mac to retrieve it on the new one. The bottom line is that I'm not convinced Migration Assistant has any advantages over Nuke and Pave. For me, it's been a lot of work cleaning things up and getting them working properly, and it's been no fun at all. The unpredictability of the problems was really not what I was hoping for, and I do not understand why everyone else talks about it like, oh, it just works. But guess what? This just in, Homebrew's broken. After I thought I'd discovered every failure of Migration Assistant, I went to install something using Homebrew. That's a command line package manager. I think an app store, but it's for command line tools. I got an error telling me that ownership and permission for the location of Homebrew files was not writable and that I should change the permissions back to my user account. Luckily, it also told me the command to do that. This means to use... Oh, wait. It wasn't hard to do, but again, it was annoying. It also suggested that I make sure my user has write permissions to that same directory and gave me those instructions. Like I said, it only took a few seconds to fix, but it's one more paper cut because of using Migration Assistant this time. And tonight, when I sat down to do the live show, I used Keyboard Maestro to do a whole bunch of stuff on my Mac, open files, open applications, shut down other applications, turn off Wi-Fi, and move a bunch of the windows around on my screen so they fit nicely for the live show. And let's see, the error it's giving me right now says preference shared sync write failed and a yellow banner. So that's nice. All right. Is anybody else a big fan of Migration Assistant? Is it just me?
It's just you. I never have that problem.
Just you. Thanks, John. Why am I not shocked you would say that? Frightening. I the last time I did it, I think was probably the Mac Mini.
Yeah, it's been a while.
My guess. You haven't had any problems. I mean, it just works, huh? I had somebody say I'm just using a bunch of weird software, but that would be blaming the developers. I mean, that many fails in the Mac App Store. Mixed results for Kevin. All right, I'm going to do a little setup for this one. What you're about to hear next was my favorite interview from the CSUN Accessible Tech Conference. It's with a gentleman named Spiro Koularis, who co-founded a company to solve a real problem for him and which will greatly benefit others. He is absolutely delightful and funny, and I really hope I get to see him again in real life. How cool was Spiro, Steve?
He was pretty cool.
When he said it all started with fighting with his wife with a remote control, that's when I fell in love with him. Save and chapter marks. I think so. I'm at 3 so far. Let's just hear the beginning. Again, in real life. I'm with Spiro Koulouris and Alan Cantwell in the Autonomous Living Technologies booth, and Spiro's going to be demonstrating for us. And I should tell you, this is a podcast, an audio podcast and video, so I'm going to probably stop you and describe things that I'm seeing a little bit here. So you're in a wheelchair, correct?
I am. I was diagnosed with ALS in 2019. I've lost the use of my hands and upper limbs.
Okay, so you've got on a pair of glasses and some little transmitter receiver sort of thingy is connected to your glasses, and you're actually going to be controlling this Mac out in front of us. Is that correct?
It's the beginning. I can control my Mac, I can control Windows, iOS, and Android devices. And my goal, when I'm at home, I want to be able to get up in the morning and do everything I want to do without saying, honey.
It's strange. I found that people with disabilities want to do the same things everybody else wants to do, which is weird, right? Who thought? Who knew?
It all started with the fight over the remote control for the TV.
All right, that's all I'm going to give you. Oh, he was great. It's so interesting what he's done. This just give you a quick idea of that Cato thing that Steve sent a picture of. So that sits on his glasses, and he's able to with his head movements be able to control a computer. So he does other gestures along with moving his head, and it's different than eye gaze, which not everybody can do eye gaze. And so he's moving things around, and but he's also designed it where, what if somebody can't move their head? What if they or the gestures? I forget what gestures he was using, but like if somebody has the use of their foot, maybe they need to select to use it by tapping their foot. So he's designed this thing to work with different kinds of disabilities, and partway through we switch over to Alan, who talked about how they're putting this in schools, and the whole thing was just fantastic. I just loved it. Was he the designer or the spokesperson? He's the co-founder of the company. So I don't know whether he designed it.
He at least is involved in the design because he's like the primary user tester of this.
It was an interesting team because most of the time I talked to Spiro, but then I talked to Alan for a little while. And then there was a third guy there who was editing JavaScript on the screen before we got there. Like they were like, can you come back in a little bit? And we agreed to come back. And I'm really glad we did. But the guy was in there. Actually, I think I saw him editing a JSON file. So that was fun. All right. I'm going to do, how long is Popport?
Popport, I think, is about 5.5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're going to do support the show. Chapter mark. And copy link. All right. Just say a little bit after that. Sure, you're going to be successful. This is fantastic. Thank you both for meeting with us.
Thank you for taking the time.
Okay, you see what I mean? You see why this was my favorite interview at CSUN? I love Spiro, and again, I sure hope I get to see him again soon. All right. Hey, want to make a podcaster smile? Consider making a one-time donation to help support the show. While Patreon is the gift that keeps on giving, PayPal donations are really swell too. If you're feeling like the show is giving you value, consider going to podfeed.com/PayPal and showing your support in a monetary way. All right, we are at 34. What did we say that? Yeah, I'll go ahead and give it to him. I'm going to do expand your ports. Oh, I can do show and tell here. Wait, where is it? Down here. this look too stupid here. All right. Aaliyah's here. Hey, Aaliyah, you aren't by any chance a Sonos user, are you? Because if you are, turn off automatic updates. Apparently, the new version of the Sonos app that they're coming out with on the 7th is not accessible. Okay, you know about it. All right, good. I'm trying to spread the word. Idiots. Really stupid. They did a complete redesign, and apparently it just doesn't work. A whole bunch of stuff does not functional. Oh, good. I'm glad you saw the post. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Expand your ports. There we go. This week, I received a review unit from Kensington for the Thunderbolt 4 Dual 4K Nano docking station. But I'm not going to call it a docking station. I'm going to call it a hub. In order to make any sense at all when I do that, let's talk about the difference between a hub and a dock. Before I can talk about the latest device, we've got to talk terminology. You just heard me call it a hub, but then the name said it's a docking station. Well, which is it? Is it a dock or is it a hub? You may remember that during our trip to MaxDock outside of Chicago last year, Steve and I got to visit the OWC folks. That whole sentence is there twice. I don't like that. About the difference between a hub and a dock. I'll leave the post alone, but it does make a lot of sense. You may remember that during our trip to MaxDock outside of Chicago last year, Steve and I got to visit the OWC factory with folks like Barry Folk and Dave Hamilton. It was great fun, and there was a Q&A session before the tour. I figured who would be better to clear up the definition of a dock versus a hub than the folks at OWC, so I asked them to explain the difference. The biggest takeaway from their response was that there is no clear differentiator between the two terms. The best the gentleman who answered me could do was to tell me how they define the two. They mostly use the term hub to describe devices that multiply the same kind of ports, and docks to describe devices that give you a bunch of different kinds of ports. For example, OWC sell an 11-port Thunderbolt dock. That gives you 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 4 USB ports, Ethernet audio, and a card reader. So that's a dock because it adds more types of ports. But OWC also sell a Thunderbolt hub that takes 1 Thunderbolt input and gives you 4 Thunderbolt ports. It also does give you 1 USB-A port, but let's not quibble about that. They still call that one a hub. Dave and I were delighted to have this cleared up, even though we knew it was an ephemeral definition. You can even find examples on OWC's site that don't quite follow this definition. So for the duration of this review of the Kensington device, I'm going to refer to it as a hub, because, like the OWC Thunderbolt hub, it multiplies the number of Thunderbolt ports plus a USB-A port. Now let's talk about the problem to be solved by Thunderbolt hubs. Basically, you have too much stuff to plug into your computer, so you need more ports. While a dock could solve the same problem, I don't think they're always the best solution. Because when you buy a dock, you're getting the set of ports the manufacturer decided that you need. Maybe you don't need an SD card slot, but you might get one with your dock. My CalDigit TS3 dock has a DisplayPort connector on the back, and I've never needed it. A Thunderbolt hub is something pretty amazing. As I explained in January of 2022 in my article entitled The Wonder of Thunderbolt Hubbing with the OWC Thunderbolt Hub, before macOS Big Sur on the Mac, you could only daisy-chain Thunderbolt devices. You couldn't multiply the number of Thunderbolt ports. I'm not sure when Windows joined the party. They may have even been there earlier, but I suspect it was with Thunderbolt 4 that tightened up the spec to make Windows and Macs in parity. Thunderbolt ports are pretty magical. They can be anything you want them to be. Unlike a dock with hardware-defined ports for Ethernet, SD cards, HDMI, and read what it says. Don't make things up. Thunderbolt ports are pretty magical. They can be anything you want them to be. Unlike a dock with a hardware-defined port, say for Ethernet, SD cards, and HDMI, a Thunderbolt port can be Ethernet. It can be an SD card reader or a video signal carrier. Maybe you just need a bunch of disk drives plugged in. But I need a Thunderbolt mic interface, but someone else needs a card reader. We all get exactly what we want in a much simpler device. Now, I actually use 2 Thunderbolt hubs. I've mentioned the OWC hub, and I use it to add more ports to my desktop setup. It's connected to one Thunderbolt port on my CalDigit TS3 Plus docking station, and it gives me 3 Thunderbolt ports and 1 USB-A port to plug in all of my recording nonsense. Now, you'll notice that only increases my Thunderbolt ports by 2, but I only needed 2 more ports at home. The OWC Thunderbolt hub costs $140, and I wrote about it in the article about the wonder of Thunderbolt hubbing. However, when I'm on the road, I use a CalDigit Element hub. This $200 Now I'm noticing that's always there. In the article about the wonder of Thunderbolt hubbing. When I'm on the road, I use a CalDigit Element hub. This hub is $200, and it gives me 3 Thunderbolt ports and 4 USB-A ports. In my write-up in July of 2023 about it, I explained that it allows me to do the live show on the road using only a MacBook Air instead of my MacBook Pro. I nearly fill up that little hub with all of my devices. Now, technically, I could probably do the show without it, but if I did, I wouldn't have a good camera, I wouldn't have a professional microphone, I wouldn't have lighting, and I wouldn't have a secondary display, so I could see my recording software and the show notes in the live chat room all at once. When Kensington offered to send me another Thunderbolt hub, I knew it would be fun to check out and do a comparison study of the CalDigit and OWC offerings. The Kensington hub provides 3 Thunderbolt ports that also provide 5 volts and 3 amps of power. The Thunderbolt port that goes to your computer provides a 65, not a 65, and I got stuck because there was no period at the end of the sentence. Let's see, 3A power. There we go. It's funny how something like that, a period can make me go, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm talking about. The Kensington hub. The Kensington hub provides 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports that provide 5 volt, 3 amp power. The Thunderbolt port that goes to your computer provides 65 watts of power. That makes the configuration pretty similar to the OWC Thunderbolt hub, except the OWC is rated for 5 watts less at 60 watts of power. The Kensington hub is the only one of the 3 that has a power switch. That might be a quick way of turning everything off if that's something you need. It also comes with a 0.8 meter passive Thunderbolt cable. A passive cable is one that doesn't contain any electronics to boost the signal for data transfer speeds. In general, you can maintain 40 gigabits per second of data transfer on a passive Thunderbolt cable, but a longer cable would require electronics to maintain that speed. I put a link in the show notes to what's the difference between active and passive Thunderbolt cables at Pluggable Technologies. The Kensington hub is a nice compact brushed aluminum package that's less than 5 by 3 by 1 inch. Just like the other 2 companies' Thunderbolt hubs, it comes with a large power supply that kind of takes the fun out of how light and small the hub itself is. Makes me wonder whether all these companies could be using GaN charging to lighten the load a little bit. The Kensington hub has 2 lights on it. It took me so long because I had to scroll past pictures of the cat. The Kensington has 2 lights on it, one to indicate power is connected, which is pretty common, but the second light is unusual. The icon looks like a chain lock, but it's actually an indicator of whether the device has been connected to a computer. I keep forgetting to scroll. Back up. Oh, that's cute. Ian, I love it. That looks like me. Send me that. That's an excellent one. Maybe a little wrinklier, but it's either me or it's, what's her name in that movie I can't remember the name of. Good story, Allison. Device has been connected to a computer. I've mentioned that the OWC is $140 and the CalDigit is $200. Well, the Kensington SD2600T comes price-wise smack dab between the other 2 at $180. One of the primary purposes of a Thunderbolt hub is to allow you to run multiple high-resolution displays. The Kensington can run dual 4K displays or a single 8K display at 60 Hz. But boy, the technical writers really had to tie themselves into knots to try to explain how that works on a Mac. I don't blame them because Apple has made this very confusing. After explaining very simply that Windows host devices can have a single 8K or dual 4K displays at 40 Hz, not 40 Hz, 60 Hz. After explaining quite simply that Windows host devices can have a single 8K or dual 4K displays at 60 Hz with no disclaimers wrapped around it, they had to say M1/M2/M3 based chipset MacBook or USB-C alt mode laptop supports only a single external display. Now, that's really confusing, but again, it's not their fault. I know what they're trying to say, and this might be confusing to some. The reason it's Apple's fault is in Apple's support article, How Many Displays Can Be Connected to a MacBook Pro, they tried to break it down simply. In order to follow the bouncing ball, you have to remember that MacBook Pros can be Jeez, I'm not making it 2 sentences. Oh, thank you, Ian. Yeah, nice variety to the reminders, exactly. In order to follow the bouncing ball, you have to remember that MacBook Pros can be configured with one of 3 chips. The basic chip, which has no moniker at all, the Pro chip, and the Max chip. The M3 MacBook Pro with no moniker can only support one display, external display. But the MacBook Pro with M2 Pro or M3 Pro chip can support 2 displays simultaneously. If you drop the extra coin for an M3 Max MacBook Pro, you can use up to 4 external displays. But what about normal people with, say, MacBook Airs? It gets even weirder. In the Apple support article about MacBook Airs and external displays, it says that the MacBook Air can support only 1 external display. But in the very next sentence, it says that if you have an M3 MacBook Air, you can support 2 external displays if the lid is closed. So if you've been able to follow this at all, it means that an M3 MacBook Air can support 2 external displays with the lid closed, but the basic M3 MacBook Pro cannot. Now, I've heard that Apple are actually going to be updating the M3 MacBook Pro, the nameless chip one, to allow it to also support 2 external displays. But from what I've read, that hasn't yet happened. And it's expected that it's not going to be like a hardware update. It's going to be some sort of firmware update. So now do you see why the technical writers at Kensington had to tie themselves into knots trying to explain this? In an experiment that has probably no value to anyone listening, I connected my M3 MacBook Pro Max to the Kensington dock and then connected the 6K Pro Display XDR and the 4K ViewSonic USB-C display. The MacBook Pro Max was able to drive both monitors. When I swapped the MacBook Pro for an M2 MacBook Air, it could not drive both monitors at the same time. And while researching how to explain this odd limitation on the number of displays, I discovered a way to learn how many displays your particular Mac can support. If you open System Settings, in the menu bar, not the window itself, select the Help menu. One of the options will be a link to the tech specs for your particular Mac on Apple's website. I'm really surprised I never noticed this before. In there, you can actually see how many displays your Mac can support. I ran a lot of experiments with the Kensington Thunderbolt hub between my MacBook Pro and my MacBook Air, and at one point when I switched devices back to the MacBook Air, neither of the connected devices came back on. Not devices, display. I ran a lot of experiments with the Kensington Thunderbolt hub between my MacBook Pro and my MacBook Air, and at one point when I switched devices back to the MacBook Air, neither of the connected displays came back on. On a lark, I tried the power button on the Kensington hub, and I did the old turn it off and turn it on again, and that did the trick to tickle the displays, and they came back on. While it would have been preferable not to have that moment of panic, I was glad the Kensington Thunderbolt hub had an easy button to cycle power. The bottom line is that the Kensington Thunderbolt hub... No, you got to say the whole name. The bottom line is that the Kensington Thunderbolt 4 dual 4K nano docking station 65-watt PD Windows/Mac OS is a solid offering in the Thunderbolt hub space. It's not as capable as the CalDigit Element Hub with 3 more USB-A ports, but it's also $180 versus $200 for the CalDigit. Other than the extra 5 watts of power delivery and the power button, it has pretty much the same form factor and capability of the OWC Thunderbolt hub. However, the OWC is $40 cheaper at $140. I don't think you can go wrong with the Kensington Thunderbolt hub, but it might be more than you need to spend.
I didn't see, maybe it's, you got to scroll down, but where you show to get the number of displays that your MacBook can support.
So I said open system settings and then go to the help menu.
Yeah, and you've got it in there, an example, but the example doesn't show the number of displays.
No, I didn't scroll all the way down to where it said it. All right. It's that's like 3/4 way down. You're just saying there's no screenshot?
Of where it says you can support this number of displays. It just doesn't say that explicitly because it's lower down, I guess. Didn't capture that.
Yeah.
Got it.
I could have sworn I saw 2 periods in a row in one of these sentences.
I saw 2 commas.
Oh, was it 2 commas?
I think so. That's what I recall.
There it is. Yes, thank you. I got it. I'm going to get rid of that double sentence at the beginning.
You don't like repeating yourself?
No. Okay.
So Ian's asking anyone using more than 2 monitors here. Do you sometimes, Al? I think you do.
You know, when I was using the, when I was testing the Kensington, I got to say, I had my my new ViewSonic USB-C display on my desk, and I was actually using all 3. So I was using my internal MacBook Pro. I always keep that up. A lot of people put their laptops in clamshell mode, and I never understand that. There's a whole display you could have there. I mean, maybe you don't have room, but I started to use 3. Seems a little greedy, though, doesn't it?
Well, if you can use the display real estate, it's not greedy.
Yeah.
As long as you got room.
All
now,
right.
Cursor transfer, if they're widely disparate or far apart, separated, that can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah. So I have a sad story. I sent Sandy
that's right.
my KYY display, and she loved it. The one because I'm not using it anymore. And she and I were talking, and we were in a FaceTime call working on some stuff, and in the middle of it, it died. I'm so sad. I assume it's still dead.
Must be. She's still sobbing.
It's like, what a tease. Had you never known?
Yeah. How long were you able to use it, Sandy? Like a day or 2, and then it just...
At most.
That is sad.
I can't think of what else to do with it. It just
2
feels
days.
like there should be some... We swapped out the cable. We swapped out to a different Mac. Oh, I like it. Aaliyah uses 2 Braille displays. Does that count? I say it counts. Yeah, we tried a different port on her Mac. We rebooted her Mac. All right. Okay, don't tell anybody, but we put the best CSUN interview with the worst CES interview. That's being shh. This one's not very good. Might be more than you need to spend. There's not a lot of pet technology here at CES, but I've come across something called Pawport, and we have Martin Diamond to show us a smart, secure pet doors. I forget why I didn't like this interview. Do you remember?
No, I don't. I was going to ask you that. I think it's because it wasn't working very well when you demoed it.
Was it just a lot of work for a lot of not much value?
Well, I could see. I mean, it's valuable to have a pet door that reacts to a little tag on the collar, so only your pet can go through it.
Yeah, but don't they already sell those?
Well,
like the real simple ones. This thing was huge. It was like
So the cool thing about this is that you can take an existing simple pet door that doesn't really have any smarts to it, and you can slide this onto it. It's made to retrofit existing pet doors, so you don't have to redo the whole thing.
But you have to bolt this giant thing on top of it.
No, it slides onto the rails of the existing pet door. I mean, you have to take the doors off the pet door, but the structure of the existing pet door, this slides onto. You don't have to kind of reinstall other than sliding it on. I liked it because you can set up schedules. You can recognize different pets. If you don't want to let them out at night, you can set that up. And it also tracks exactly.
Hi, Tesla.
That was Tesla. It
It's her
tracks.
ears.
You can see when your pet went out versus came back in, and separate pets if you have multiple pets.
Maybe I need to watch it again.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I've got 5 minutes to finish, Steve.
All right. Get moving.
Yeah, Jill, if you have any ideas, I need one with touch. You want touch ID for your pet? All right, here we go. PORT, and thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, that's going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeed.com anytime you like? Don't forget to come to the... Can't just go ad-libbing in the middle there. PORT, and thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, that is going to wind us up for this week, but don't forget to join us on Tuesday morning for the Apple announcement. Again, that's at podfeed.com/chat to chat with all your little friends from the NosillaCastaways. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeed.com anytime you like? If you have a question or suggestion, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeed.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeed.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you go to podfeed.com/YouTube. If you want to join in the conversation, you can join our great Slack community at podfeed.com/Slack, where you can talk to me and all of the other lovely NosillaCastaways in there. You can support the show at podfeed.com/Patreon, or just make me happy with a one-time donation at podfeed.com/PayPal. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeed.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed. Oh, did Jill give you an idea?
Apparently she had a similar problem and used a different cable, which fixed her monitor issue. Interesting. But it did work with the cable did you send a cable?
I sent the original cable.
Didn't you have a problem with that cable yourself?
Hum another bar for me.
I seem to recall it was odd that some device you got had a cable that came with it, but it wasn't working with the cable that came with it, and you ended up having, I don't know if it was that display or one of your cameras or I recall that.
I don't know. I don't remember. We're probably ready for a chapter mark thing,
count?
but Kevin's not giving it to us, so I guess I'm going to have to remember.
All right. I'll start working my end.
6.
6. 6 is a good number.
All right, I'm going to export the show, and let's hope some of my automation works this week.
Yeah, good luck.
So many things didn't work. Well, it's 5:58 p.m., and I think we have finished. So, Jill, to be specific, you had a display that the backlight didn't come on? And that's what the problem was? It'd be awesome if it was a cable. Oh, wait, we got 2 minutes. Oh, wait, no, I'm just not scrolled up enough.
It would not light up or show anything
You have the
on
lapel.
the display.
Oh, really?
So,
it'd be
like what
great.
Sandy's seeing.
It'd be great if it was just it's so, yeah, it's got to be a USB-C, it's got to be able to carry data and power. Got the fancier cable. All right. Oh, I hope that'd be it. That would be awesome.
Yes, it
Let me
would.
know, Sandy. All right, glad we asked in here. The NosillaCastaways rock. All right, I'm going to say goodbye to Rose. Rose hasn't been here in forever. I got to
No,
find
it's
out if
been a
she's
while.
okay.
Yeah.
Haven't seen her in a while, but I'm going to kiss her goodbye anyway. Bye, Rose. Bye, live audience.
Bye bye.